When most people think about dinosaurs, they imagine giant lizards, gigantic versions of modern crocodiles or snakes, enormous turtles and other cold-blooded animals that bask and slither around in the sun to keep nice and toasty. And even though many dinosaurs were indeed closely related to reptiles, evidence suggests that they had feathers like this dino might have looked more like a giant chicken than a giant lizard. So get ready for a new look at the dinosaurs. Hi, and welcome to Paleo Logic. I'm your host, and today we're going to talk about the dinosaurs. Now, I know that seems like an obvious topic given that this is a paleontology channel, but there's a reason I chose this particular topic. You see, ever since the days when Barnum and Bailey Circus came out with their dinosaur exhibit, featuring a man in a clunky costume stomping around inside a cardboard T-Rex suit, we've kind of defaulted to this image of what a dinosaur looks like: teeth, claws, tail, stomp, stomp, roar. But that default image is mostly wrong. It all goes back to the early days of paleontology itself, when people like Charles Darwin believed that dinosaurs were just sort of like big lizards, only extinct. The problem is that when you find an extinct animal preserved in rock, it's rarely complete. It's often just a few bone fragments or a single tooth, and if the fossil is only a fragment, it's going to be difficult to tell if that animal was scaly or furry or feathered. So scientists made the assumption that dinosaurs were like modern reptiles, and so they were probably scaly and cold-blooded and laid eggs, and then everyone just kind of ran with that. But over the years, we've found a lot more fossils, and those fossils have added up to a very different picture. Now, when we say dinosaur, we're talking about a very diverse group of animals. They lived all across Earth from the late Triassic period through the end of the Cretaceous. So that's over 200 million years. During that time, dinosaurs split into lots of different groups with lots of different characteristics. Some were small and others were huge. Some were quick and some were slow. Some ate meat and others were plant eaters. So it's impossible to make sweeping generalizations about what all dinosaurs were like. But we do know that many of them lived in warm climates and that many of them were active during the day when the sun is shining. If they basked like modern lizards, they would need to spend a lot of time outside doing nothing much except soaking up the sun. And that could take a long time. Lizards can spend hours basking before they get the energy they need to be active. But it turns out that dinosaurs didn't necessarily have to do that because, unlike lizards, it turns out many dinosaurs could regulate their own body temperature. In other words, they were warm-blooded. Mammals and birds are the only other warm-blooded animals alive today. In order to stay warm-blooded, animals need to maintain a constant internal body temperature. That means that they need to generate their own heat, and they also need to actively cool themselves down when they get too hot. And yes, birds famously do both of those things. They shiver to generate heat, and they pant and spread their wings to cool down. And it turns out that dinosaurs probably did the same thing. In 2020, researchers studied the hip bones of several dinosaur species. Those bones had large openings where muscles could attach, and those muscles would have helped the dinosaurs move around and stay upright. But they also would have helped the dinosaurs shiver, just like they help birds shiver. The same thing happened in 2018 when researchers examined the arm bones of theropods, which were carnivorous dinosaurs that lived during the latter part of the Jurassic and the Cretaceous periods. Their ancestors were small proto-raptors that lived about 230 million years ago, and they evolved into some of the largest land predators of all time, including Tyrannosaurus rex. And as researchers looked at the bones, they realized that those arm bones looked a lot like bird bones. And that wasn't surprising given that birds are the direct descendants of theropods. But what was surprising is that the structure of those bones suggested that theropsides had feathers. You see, feathers don't come from the bones themselves, but they do come from the skin. And skin doesn't preserve in the fossil record. But feather follicles, the places where feathers grow out of the skin, do leave scars on bones. So the presence of those scars gives us a window into the past, and it tells us what dinosaurs looked like. The scars left behind by feathers are called imprints, and imprint size varies depending on where on the body the feathers grew. So after looking at the distribution of the scars on those fossilized arm bones, researchers created a map of where feathers may have grown on dinosaurs. So based on this research, it appears that many dinosaurs, including T-Rex, were actually feathered dinosaurs. Another study conducted in 2023 took this one step further and used advanced imaging techniques to reconstruct the exact shape of the feathers. These included V-shaped tail feathers that likely played a role in display and maybe even swimming. As far as the famous T-Rex goes, researchers suggest that T-Rex may have looked something like this reconstruction, less lizard and more bird. But wait, there's more. Not only were dinosaurs probably feathered, but they were also probably active parents who cared for their young, unlike most modern reptiles, which generally don't show parental care beyond laying eggs. Of course, there are exceptions. Some lizards will guard their eggs, and others will carry their babies in their mouths. But among birds, parental care is basically universal. So again, birds are the exception, not the norm. And scientists once assumed that dinosaurs were like most reptiles and didn't really care for their young. But evidence from the genus Oviraptor, which lived in what is now China in the late Cretaceous period, has turned that around. In 2023, scientists announced the discovery of a nest containing a preserved embryo. The nest was made of sticks and leaves, kind of like a bird's nest, and the embryo was curled up inside of it. What's more, its posture was unmistakable. The head was tucked under its wing and the feet were tucked up against its body. In other words, the embryo was sitting pretty, just like a bird embryo. Bird-like embryos have only been found in 2 other types of dinosaurs, and all 3 of those dinosaurs were Oviraptorosaurs. So it looks like dinosaurs were more like birds than like modern reptiles, not just because they were warm-blooded and feathered, but also because they incubated their eggs and cared for their young. All of that being said, we're still learning about dinosaurs. We're uncovering more and more evidence that they were more diverse than we thought. There were plenty of kinds of dinosaurs that were adapted to cold climates, and there were even marine dinosaurs. And we're still finding new ones all the time. In 2023, for instance, scientists described a new species of herbivorous dinosaur that lived in what is now Utah. They named it Utahceratops gettyi. It's an early relative of the famous Triceratops. It's only the second-horned dinosaur ever discovered in the state and the first from the Morrison Formation. The Morrison Formation is one of the most famous fossil deposits in the world. It's located in western Colorado and eastern Utah, and it contains the remains of hundreds of dinosaurs, including Stegosaurus, Diplodocus, and Camptosaurus. This new discovery shows that horned dinosaurs were more widespread than we thought, and it makes us wonder what other dinosaurs we might find in the future. Every time we learn something new about dinosaurs, it changes our perspective on what life was like in the days of old. And every time we uncover a new fossil, it brings us closer to understanding the history of life on Earth. Thanks for coming along on this journey with me. And if you want to learn more about our journey to understand dinosaurs, I've got a link in the description to a great article from the Smithsonian. Big thanks to my supporters who helped to make this video possible. Your support really does make a difference. And if you'd like to get involved, you can go to our support page. From all of us here at Paleo Logic, this is your host. And remember, stay curious.